After your experience, would you advise someone else in your position to blow the whistle on government wrongdoing?
Yes, but make sure you understand what you're getting yourself into. Do not speak to the FBI, and make sure you have a lawyer right from the start. If my case is any example, they'll do everything they can to take anything you say and anything they find and use it to justify charges that in my case were actually framed. See, I told the truth to the FBI agents. They didn't believe me. In fact, 4 of the 10 felony counts were for making false statements. One of them was for obstructing justice. You know why? Because the chief prosecutor said that unless I cooperated with the investigation, they were going to pursue prosecution. So, the answer is yes.
Under what circumstances do you think that classified information should be leaked?
That's a loaded question. Classified is, see, what's happening now is the government is increasingly wants to classify as much as possible. Because what that allows them to do is create a larger ambit in which they can charge you for having either retained, disclosed, or leaked classified information. But to answer it directly, if it involves war crimes, if it involves wrongdoing, if it involves violations of statute, then yes. There's very little in government that actually truly ever needs to be classified and always needs to be placed under constant review. The problem is that the oversight mechanisms and the very executive orders and laws and statutes that govern the classification system are just abjectly broken. And so when everything is increasingly classified, nothing is classified. And if everything is increasingly classified, what remains a secret?
You mentioned that former colleagues said to you that they believe talking to reporters is a crime. Do you believe that that attitude is pervasive among government employees? And maybe you could address it inside and outside of the intelligence community.
It is true that in the intelligence community, of which I was a part for many, many years, both as a government employee and as a contractor, and even in the military, that you do sign secrecy agreements. There was this misunderstanding that if you happen to speak to a reporter, that by definition, anything that you might say to them could be characterized as classified. Because you, unless it was authorized, then you were in an unauthorized status, and therefore you were liable under administrative rules. Like I said, there are distinctions between agencies, although increasingly they're centralizing this through the D&I. And so, yes, I had individuals that I used to work with who assumed that it was criminal under the U.S. law to have any contact whatsoever with a reporter. In fact, I was even asked that question by Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes a couple of years ago. It's not a crime to speak with a reporter. There are certain administrative rules governing what that looks like. I was under an administrative rule that said if I were to have unauthorized contact with a reporter, that I was liable to certain administrative sanctions. At that time, the worst that could occur is they no longer trusted me and they would remove my security clearance, which would be a condition of continuing employment. After 2005, when I knew that there was a strong likelihood that I would get caught up by mere association in the criminal national security leak investigation regarding the Rise and Lichtblau article, which revealed publicly for the first time the existence of the so-called warrantless wiretapping program, I knew that they were now criminalizing contact with the press.
Questioner says, you don't acknowledge that there are sometimes legitimate government secrets. Isn't this more about balance? Don't we need to keep some secrets?
I think I partially addressed that earlier. However, are there legitimate government secrets? Remember, I lived in the secrecy regime for many, many years. When it comes to troop movements, nuclear secrets, and those kinds of things, right, certain sources and methods, then there are legitimate reasons to keep those secret for that time. The secrecy system, and I'm going to be very, very clear here, is not to be used to cover government illegality, wrongdoing, hiding, administrative inefficiency, ineffectiveness, or in fact, where the government's actually threatening public safety and health and safety, fraud, waste, and abuse. In my experience, the secrecy system has become so corrupted that it's now being used routinely to do precisely that, under the color and cover of law. And when the color and cover of law is no longer sufficient, then we'll just make up the rules. So you have a real conundrum that under the blanket of national security, you reveal anything, guess what? You're liable. And if it's about the things we don't want you to know, because in fact it is in violation of law and statute, then guess what? We're going to come after you even stronger. I mean, it's unprecedented. It really is unprecedented that this administration has used the Espionage Act as a means and mechanism to prosecute 7 Americans for non-spy activities. Non-spy. When you're painted with the Espionage Act, it's the worst thing, because you're immediately put into the same category historically as the Aldrich Ames of the world or the Hansons of the world. The real spies, to say it that way, because that's how that World War I statute was originally designed. As troubled as it is in terms of the Constitution, it was designed to go after spies, not truth tellers, not whistleblowers, and not people having contact with the press. It was not designed for that. But that's what it's turned into.